this is what I would say to someone out there who's a customer right now. Placeformom.com is an excellent online resource to read some articles, to get a familiarity with the business, the options that are out there, to maybe get a list of the facilities in your area that might qualify for what you're looking for. But do not, under any circumstances, ever fill out a form on that website, because they will spam the living daylights out of you. Yeah. I got, and this is no lie, no exaggeration, I kept track because I'm a marketer, so I started to get really frustrated with this. I filled the form out on a Sunday. Within 60 hours, not even 3 days, 2.5 days, within 2.5 days of filling out the form, I had 18 phone calls or text messages.
Wow.
A good portion of them were from a placeformom.com, but the other part of them were from 4 different facilities in Louisville. So they immediately did their job. They turned around and sold my lead to multiple places. So I was getting bombarded. And I can only think of 1 or 2 other times in my life. And again, I'm a marketer, so I know a little bit more than the average bear about the businesses. I can only think of 1 or 2 times in my life I was ever that angry at a shopping process. I was just mad. And I immediately was opting out of everything and telling people stop calling me and all this kind of stuff. And it was almost, I had to start over because I had to get through that mess before I could even reasonably reach out to these communities and not be angry at them too, even though I know it wasn't their fault.
Welcome to The Move In, a senior living marketing podcast from Unlock Health, a full-service marketing partner for the aging services industry. Join us for candid conversations exploring the latest marketing strategies with the senior living community leaders and innovative solution partners who are moving our industry forward. Together, we'll build a community to build better communities. What happens when a seasoned marketer suddenly becomes the customer while trying to find the best community for their parent? Hello, I'm Larry Williams, and welcome to the Move In Senior Living Marketing powered by Unlock Health. It turns out some of the most valuable lessons in senior living marketing don't come from strategy decks or analytics. They come from living the experience firsthand. That's why today's conversation is such a powerful way to start the year. It reminds us that the work we do truly matters, and it helps level set our focus on the small but often overlooked steps that make the biggest difference for families. In this episode, I'm joined by our podcast producer, Jason Falls, the Chief Strategy Officer at Falls & Partners and executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. Jason recently navigated the senior living search for his father, and he shares a real unfiltered look at what helped, what frustrated him, and what ultimately influenced the decision. We talk about what the senior living search actually feels like for families and why pricing, transparency, and human connection matter more than amenities, and how small marketing and sales moments often have the biggest impact on trust and decisions. All right, let's get into it. We are on the Move in Senior Living Marketing. I got another friend of mine, Jason Falls, and Jason is a special guest just because Jason is really he listens to this podcast more than anybody else, I would say, because he is our podcast production partner. So, Jason, you have to hear my voice more than anybody else, and I apologize for that, but I'm very thankful for everything you do to make this podcast happen.
Well, I'm glad to be able to be a partner with you guys and with Unlock on the podcast, and serendipitously producing the podcast for the last couple of years. It was really awesome because what we're going to talk about today is my customer journey with my father. And when I realized I needed to find a community and a facility for him, I was like, well, I kind of know what's going on because I produce this podcast every week, which is great.
It's you probably got some inside baseball as that led up to that conversation with him. So, Jason, thank you for all that you do with this podcast. And I tell everyone when I meet people at conferences of like, man, if you're going to start a podcast, just make sure you're connected with the right group who can help you with that production process. Makes the world a difference. And sure we've been, I don't know where we would be without your help. And we met at the mental health marketing conference.
That's true.
And I think you and I set up a table together, and I just appreciate you. I was just asking you questions at that time, and you had such valuable insight. I'm like, once we start this is my guy. I'm going to be reaching out to him 2 years down the road. We're having a conversation on the podcast. So again, thanks for all that you do. Just quick introduction about Jason. He is the chief strategy officer at Falls and Partners and the executive producer at the Marketing Podcast Network. Tell us a little bit about both of those, the Falls and Partners as well as the Marketing Podcast Network.
Sure. Falls and Partners is basically a digital marketing strategy consulting firm. I specialize in a couple different areas. Podcast production is one of those areas, but that's actually more an extension of the Marketing Podcast Network, which I'll get to in a minute. But my primary focus is I'm an influence marketing strategist. So I help businesses and brands connect with content creators and influential people around the internet and even offline too, to kind of help communicate their marketing messages out to various and sundry audiences. I don't look at it as strictly TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I look at it as influence marketing, not influencer marketing. So I take the R off and I say, hey, we need to influence audiences to take action. What influential parties can we work through to do that? So sometimes that bleeds into community, relationships. Sometimes it bleeds into media. So it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. So I'm a PR guy by trade. So that's kind of where that sort of mixture comes in. But then I also have another sort of area of expertise and specialty in social listening. So analyzing online conversations to help. In fact, I started a research company years ago that I think was exactly 7 years ahead of its time, because 7 years after I shut down the research company, a client came to me and said, you remember you were pitching me that about 7 years ago? I want you to do that now. But it was a research company based on researching and indexing online conversations to give consumer insights to brands. And one of the first reports I ever did was on the senior living industry. Now, this would have been 2015 or 16, so it was a long time ago. So the insights are probably not nearly the same, but I've kind of dabbled around the space for quite some time.
Yeah, I think you were well ahead of your time with that. Like,
Well,
I just see the power in it now, and I'm
Yeah.
sure there was a lot of power back then, but I feel like things have changed drastically since then.
Yeah, they have. I mean, not only have the social networks changed and where conversations are happening changed, but what businesses can do with it. I mean, I was pitching to brands back then. We can analyze people talking about your brand online and give you insights into what product or feature sets you need to develop for the next iteration of your product. And brand managers were looking at me like I had three heads. So they didn't understand it then. I've got a couple that understand it now, which is good. And then the Marketing Podcast Network is, I had a marketing podcast that focused on influence marketing. And I was on I was on a podcast network for a couple of years. And the promise there was, we will split advertising revenue with you if you'll put an ad in your show, and we'll cross promote you to all the other shows. I was with that network for a couple of years, never saw either one of them. So I just got frustrated one day and said, surely this can't be hard. And so I went out and figured it out, started inviting all my marketing podcast friends to be on the network. And now we've got over 85 podcasts on a network of marketing expertise that ranges from copywriting to branding to SEO to influence marketing and everything in between. And we basically have the ability to say to someone, if you market to marketers, we have 100% of our audience are marketers. So you should advertise on our platform because it's a really relevant place for you to do that. So, and that's sort of where the podcast production kind of, evolved from.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I see both on the Falls and Partner side as well as the Marketing Podcast Network, the value of not having that shotgun approach, but really having that rifle approach of where we know who that that target market audience is, and really aligning with your marketing initiatives to connect with that specific group.
Yep.
I feel like we can do that better than ever these days.
We
Right.
can. The digital world offers us a lot of great opportunities, and it's only getting more, laser focused with all the different AI driven tools and things like that can assist you in doing good marketing. But yeah, it's a fun place to play.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for being a part of this conversation. I appreciate your willingness to tell this story. And I mentioned this in, I'd say, that bridge episode going from 2025 to 2026, detailing, really what that plan for 2026 looks like and why we're going to start with the conversation with you, which is the story about, you looking for helping your father find the right community and what that process looked like. And as you and I spoke before, it was, some highs, some lows, a lot of frustrations, different marketing tactics that did and did not work. And so I said, Can we have this conversation on the podcast? Because I do feel like it's a really good conversation as we do align strategies going into the new year. And I think it's really important for us, whether it's senior living marketing providers or operators in the space, to hear from someone who recently gone through this and understand really what worked, what helped, the support, and also the frustrations, because we need to be aware of all of that. So thank you for that. Let's start with, this is the story about your father. What's your father's name?
So my dad's name, he goes by Chili. His name is Charles, but he's a junior. So my grandfather's brother couldn't pronounce Charlie correctly when he was little, and so my grandfather became Chili, and then my dad is Charles Mason Falls Jr., so he became Little Chili. And my
Little
mother
Chili.
refused to name me the third because she knew everybody called me Little Chili, and she didn't want that. So,
Little
but he-
Chili.
yeah, so he goes by
could be
Chili.
that could be your rap name, Little Chili. Little Chili. That would be awesome.
That's a good
But
one.
I might not address you by Jason ever again. It might be a Little Chili at this
That's
point.
okay. That's all
Okay,
right.
I
I'll
appreciate
answer
it.
to it. I know what you're talking about.
So, how did this process begin? Is it something that was there an event that happened that
Mm,
caused he and you to start looking for, living options, or how
sure.
did this really, unfold for you?
So the circumstances are, I don't think they're atypical. My dad is 76 years old. He lives on the family farm in Virginia with his older sister, my Aunt Jean, who has dementia. And her daughter, Amanda, lives there as well and is kind of the caretaker for her mom. But she was kind of the ad hoc caretaker for my dad as he started to develop some health issues. He's got COPD. He went through prostate cancer and beat that for the most part. He's on some other, anti-cancer medications and things like that to keep it away. But he's got COPD. He mostly uses a mobility scooter, but he doesn't have memory issues. He doesn't have other physical ailments. So he's generally able to take care of himself. But he had a fall in the summer. And then a couple of months later, he had another fall. And then a few weeks later, he had a third. And on the third fall, my cousin Amanda basically called and said, "We need to start talking about something for your dad because I can't handle them both."
Sure.
And in all fairness to her, she's absolutely right. She can't be taking care of two, aging seniors who are having health troubles. And so dad and I talked, and I knew this was going to be because, I listen to your podcast regularly. I knew this was going to be an emotional conversation. It was going to be difficult, but fortunately dad was like, "Okay, I understand that Amanda can't handle both of us. We need to figure this out." And his first suggestion was, "Let's put a chairlift and ramps in your house." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, no, 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 we're not doing that." So we started looking for a facility. And basically, I knew we were going to be looking for mostly an independent facility because he doesn't really need constant health care. He doesn't need reminders on, his medications. He doesn't really even need help getting to and from doctor's appointments. But if he were to fall, I want someone nearby to be able to help him. So
Sure.
I knew from the onset, before I even searched for anything, we were going to look for an independent living facility that had assisted living, upgrades and features as the need arose. And so that's what we started. That's where I started. And then I started searching. And so I
Yeah.
went to the internet and started searching for stuff.
Now I gotta ask this question. What did you search? Did you search independent living? Did you search nursing homes? Did you search retirement communities? That's always the question, which is,
Sure.
what do people search when they're looking for this next step? Because people within the business, we say one thing,
Mhm.
but you never know what people are actually searching as they go through that
Sure.
process.
Well, and I started, and I'm a little bit more informed, obviously,
Mhm.
because I listen to this
Sure.
podcast as its producer. I'm a little bit more informed than the regular consumer. So I may not be a great example of this because
Okay.
I started looking for independent living facilities or independent living communities and assisted living because I knew that was going to be something that I had to have a piece of. Retirement homes is completely out of my vernacular, and that's just from being around the industry long enough to know that retirement homes
Sure.
are, that's almost more in my brain. That's more like indigent, only Social Security can pay for it. Like that's the last resort in my
Yeah.
brain.
Okay.
And I think a lot of consumers like that because I've talked to a lot of people who've been through this process as part of this process too. And that's kind of assisted living, independent living are terms that are familiar, I think, to most people.
Yeah.
So that's what I started searching for. And of course, the first place that I found, because I'm sure they spend a ton of money on SEO and whatnot, was a place for mom.com,
Mhm.
one of the aggregators. And I didn't know anything about a place for mom.com other than they were a good online resource to like find some potential facilities if you're looking. And they've got some good articles and videos and whatnot. So it was really a learning resource for me. And then I did the one thing that I shouldn't have done, and that's fill out a form.
That's where a lot of the frustration stemmed from, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I would, and I've had other people tell me this after the fact in talking to other folks who have gone through this process with their aging parents. Basically, they all agree. We all agree. This is what I would say to someone out there who's a customer right now. Placeformom.com is an excellent online resource to read some articles, to get a familiarity with the business, the options that are out there, to maybe get a list of the facilities in your area that might qualify for what you're looking for. But do not, under any circumstances, ever fill out a form on that website because they will spam the living daylights out of you.
Yeah.
I got, and this is no lie, no exaggeration. I kept track because I'm a marketer. So I started to get really frustrated with this. I filled the form out on a Sunday. Within 60 hours, not even 3 days, 2.5 days, within 2.5 days of filling out the form, I had 18 phone calls or text messages.
Wow.
A good portion of them were from a place for mom.com, but the other part of them were from 4 different facilities in
Mhm.
Louisville. So they immediately did their job. They turned around and sold my lead to multiple places.
Mhm.
So I was getting bombarded. And
Yeah.
I can only think of 1 or 2 other times in my life, and again, I'm a marketer, so I know a little bit more than the average bear about the
Mhm.
businesses. I can only think of 1 or 2 times in my life I was ever that angry at a
Sure.
shopping process. I was just mad.
Yeah.
And I immediately was opting out of everything and telling people stop calling me and all this kind of stuff. And it was almost I had to start over because I had to get through that mess before I could
Yeah.
even reasonably reach out to these communities and not be angry at them too, even though
For
I know it
sure.
wasn't their fault. So
Yeah, they were just doing they saw, someone who had a need, and they were doing their job to reach out,
yeah,
but so was all the other communities. So were the other communities, and it's tough because it's such an emotional process as it is, and you don't need that extra, let's say, noise in where you're trying to get through a lot of this, but make good decisions, and e everyone has stories,
yeah,
about this process, and as I got further into my career in serving senior living communities, I talked to my mom as she was looking to help my grandmother, as she was looking for a memory care uh, community.
mhm,
And she said that she felt like a place for mom had some great resource, great information,
yeah.
but she never filled out that form, and she
Well,
said it was helpful there, and so it's unfortunate that that's the response is you yeah, I'm sure it's no different than a lot of groups. If you provide your information, there's going to be, you're gonna have this information that's really taken advantage of to a certain extent,
sure.
and I'm sorry that you went through, all of that. So, you whiteboard the whole thing, you just take it and just erase it all. How did you restart?
So I restarted by reaching out to the individual facilities, and I made a spreadsheet. There's about 6 or 7 communities in the Louisville, Kentucky
Mhm.
area that just searching around the website, looking at rankings, looking at
Sure.
reviews online, things like that. There's 6 or 7 that I would say are these are in my wheelhouse of where I want to look.
Sure.
And
And
then
and
there,
real quick, Jason, let me ask you this, did you take to get that 6 or 7, did that come from the people who reached out to you from Place for Mom, or did you just say, "I'm ignoring all of that. I'm just going to Google, independent living, Louisville, Kentucky, and
sure.
just see what popped up?"
I used a combination of things. First
Okay.
of all, I knew better than to be angry at the communities because of a place for mom. So I immediately discounted any of them that reached out to me. I don't care who reached out to me. Fine. I took a placeformom.com out of the equation, with the exception of they still have listings and great resources and reviews
Sure.
and whatnot. So I looked at that as a resource. And then I looked at other search results and whatnot. And I went to each of the websites and kind of bounced around. And there was probably, probably 12 or so communities that I looked at, but there's 6 or 7 that emerged as, okay, this looks like a place where my dad would be comfortable.
Mhm.
They seem to have what I'm looking for in terms of a little bit of assisted living, and he could, migrate over to that in a bigger way as he needs it. Location was not really a big consideration because they're all in Louisville, and Louisville's not huge.
Mhm.
I can get there. Some of them had their pricing on the website, which was very helpful because there was 1 or 2 that I immediately said, there's no way he can afford that. We can't go there.
Sure.
Right. So I took a couple of the top, most expensive off the board. And then anyone that looked like they were a nursing home or more indigent care, things like that, I took those off. There's about 6 or 7 that I wound up with on my list. And then I started going through their website and saying, okay, what's the deposit fee if I can find it? What's the monthly rent or fee if I can find it? Do they have assisted living, kind of a migration, path for him? Are all the meals included? Do they have on-site nurses? Are utilities included in the rent, or are there extra costs? And then I made appointments with 6 facilities and started going around and meeting with all of them and doing tours. And that's where the second insight came in that just blew my mind. And
Okay.
so
Don't
go ahead.
hold on to that thought, because
I'll
I'm
hold
really,
on to
when you
that 'cause
said that,
there's a big one.
yeah, the bit next second, the insight. So now, did you reach out directly to these communities? Did you fill out any form? Like, what did that look like? And what time did you typically respond? Was it at night, on the weekends? Like, did you have any struggles going through that process?
I wouldn't say struggles. I did most of my stuff at night, and
Okay.
I normally tried to find an email contact on their website. I didn't want to fill out forms because I knew that would kick me into some sort of lead system.
Sure.
So I looked for an email, and if I didn't have an email, I would look for a phone number.
Okay.
And I tried to find names of, who are the people, who's the individual human being that I want to talk to.
Mhm.
That was a little frustrating because none of the websites wanted to really put their own staff on there other than like the executive director, which I thought was strange.
Yeah.
But I would call and leave messages and say, here's my name, here's my dad's name, here's my situation. I'd like to schedule a tour. That was
Mhm.
my first ask, was I'm scheduling a tour. I've already gotten to the point to where I know you're in the ballpark. I want to come see and experience your community.
Yeah.
And almost everybody got back to me pretty quickly. There
Okay.
were a couple that I had to poke a couple of times. There was one that was on my list that fell off the list because nobody ever returned a phone call or
Hmm.
an email. And I'm I guess they're full and they don't care. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think
But
that also gives you, even if they did call later on,
yeah,
it kinda puts a little bad taste in your mouth.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, "Hey, look, if you're not gonna follow up back up with me quickly, how are you gonna take care of my father?"
Exactly, exactly. So, and of the 6 or 7, I think that I reached out to, I wound up with 5 that I actually went and visited and scheduled tours
Okay.
with and whatnot. And then that's where the big insight popped.
Let's go for it. I'm
Okay,
excited about this.
here's and again, trust me, there's a couple things that I will proceed this with. I'm
Sure.
a marketing person. I've been in marketing for a long time, and I am also not a shopper. I do not go to the
Mhm.
grocery store. I don't go shopping. So for me to go to 5 different facilities is a big stretch.
Sure.
Um, but what I learned in going to these 5 facilities, which were the narrowed down list of these are the top 5, my dad could probably be happy here. The big insight that came out of that whole thing is there's not a shred of difference from
Mm,
one to the other. You
yeah.
could put their name in a hat, pull out any one other than cost. There's no difference.
Mhm.
Great food, great communities, great people, nursing on staff. You could migrate over into assisted living or even memory care if you needed to. That it was beautiful campuses. They have activities. They take field trips. They'll take you to your doctor's appointment. There's all these great things. Some of them are add-on costs, but they were all generally the same. The 2 things that separated these 5 that were in my wheelhouse were total cost
Mhm.
per month, the rent or whatever you want to call that fee that you have to pay to be in the community. Whether or not all of the utilities, including internet and cable, were included in that cost. and whether or not my dad would have to pay extra for someone to do his laundry once a week.
Hmm.
Those were the only differences. There was not.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a discerning shopper. I'm not going to look at which Ivy League institution did the executive director or the on staff nurse go to. I don't
Yeah.
care. I'm going to assume they hire good people. So I'm not a real discerning shopper, but that was the only difference. And that blew my mind. I could not
Sure.
believe that there was so little difference from one to the other than cost.
Yeah. And ironically, that's the conversation we always have, which is don't keep going back to the amenities. It's typically all the same. What is, just lean into really what's that story and how do you actually connect as people through this
Mhm.
more than
That's
anything else? And I feel like you're saying the same thing, which is you narrow down that list a lot of based on cost. First, we have to understand what the cost look like, but who did you really feel connected with and who's going
Mhm.
to take care of you? Because
Yep.
we keep going back to that phrase, an emotional process. Whoever really stands out in terms of the customer service, I feel like that's the group who really, takes that next step. I think something else that's really important to highlight is how important pricing is in this conversation because you're able to disqualify a lot. I think
Yep.
that helps on the operator side because they're not working with potential leads that aren't a good fit. And
Yep.
so go ahead and narrow that down so you can go ahead and narrow that scope and really connect with the best fits.
That's true.
So you go through that, you narrow that down to 5. How did that next phase look like then?
Well, to kind of follow on your point with that sort of emotional connection and, who do I feel most comfortable with? Basically, it came down to two. And my
Mhm.
dad and I had a very brief conversation about which one. And I said, Dad, I really liked the connection with this
Mhm.
particular community. I felt like they got me, they got you, they understand who you are. I think it's a great place, etc. It happened to be the highest cost.
Mhm.
The next choice happened to be the lowest cost.
Hmm.
And I basically said the connection was fine. It wasn't as good as the other one, but it wasn't bad. I
Sure.
liked the young lady that I talked to. I felt like the community was, lively and vibrant and there were friendly people there and I thought dad would fit in and he just said, "Well, at the end of the day, I'd rather pay less. So let's go with that one." And that's
Mm.
ultimately what we did. It came down to cost. If I were, if I'd won the lottery the day before and had all kinds of money, I probably would have said, "Nah, dad, I'm going to foot the bill for the good
Sure.
one, next one up."
Yeah.
But again, you're splitting hairs. I mean, he's going to be very happy where he's going. I'm
Mhm.
99.9% sure. And I don't think he would be any less happy or more happy had he gone with the other one. He's going to have his little apartment. He's going to do his thing. My dad is kind of like me. He's a social butterfly. He's going to make friends and he's going to probably tell a lot of tall tales at the bar during happy hour each week. And everybody's going to love him and it's going to be great. And it wouldn't really matter any of the five that we chose. He
Mhm.
could have gone to any of them and it probably would have been the same story. And I would be reticent to know that anyone could claim differently from any of these communities because I just didn't see any difference.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you adding that and clarifying. When so your father hasn't moved in yet, it sounds
Correct.
like. Okay,
Right.
when is he set to move in?
He'll move in mid-February.
Okay.
And so my my father's an interesting bird. He's also a fellow podcaster. He has a travel podcast,
Nice. What's
and
that podcast about?
it's travel and cruise industry news. He's a
That
big
is
cruiser,
awesome.
so he loves cruising.
Okay.
So this is again, Dad knows that he's going to guilt me into just about anything. So he's leaving to go on a cruise the first week of February. He's not coming back until mid-February. So in that time, I'm supposed to have his new facility set up and all his stuff moved in so he can just show up. So
So that leads me to a really, really important question. By the way, that's awesome. He has this podcast, the travel and news, travel cruise podcast. That's great.
yeah.
So he is in Virginia.
Hmm.
You're in Kentucky.
Hmm.
How difficult was that in terms of looking for a place in Kentucky while he's in Virginia? Did
Sure.
he visit any through this process, or did you really just do all the research and manage that for them.
Yeah, I basically did all of it. I took videos of each of the apartments, and took pictures of some of the, the dining rooms and the facilities and all that kind of stuff so that he could see, hey, when I tell you there's not a difference from one to another, he can see there's not a difference from one to the other.
Yeah.
A little bit of difference on the layout of the room and a little bit of difference on the color of the carpet. And, but that's just not really a discernible difference. So I did videos of each of the rooms, and we were debating between a studio versus a 1-bedroom. And there was one where we actually looked at a 2-bedroom. And so I, did all these videos and I sent them to him. And then I'd get on the phone with him after, my day's visits, because I tried to double them up and do like 2 in a day. And we would just talk through, what'd you like about that? What'd you not like about that? And I just made little notes in my little spreadsheet. And again, there was just nothing that stood out that made any one seem like the best option. And honestly, the only thing that made the most expensive option seem like the best option is the sales lady, the community person that I did the tour with and talked to. She was raised on a cruise line. Her dad is a cruise captain. And so it was like, well, my dad does a cruise podcast. This is like perfect. This is so cool.
Yeah.
And so that's the only regret that I have, is we didn't make that one work out, because I think Dad would have had a lot of fun with her and knowing more about her and her dad and whatnot. But needless to say, she can still be on his podcast. So we're all cool.
Oh, 100%. Well, I got some other ideas for on that, by the way, that we'll touch on after this conversation. So that's really helpful. Let me ask you this. It was the search process. Were there any other marketing, I'd say, methods did you look into? Did you look into any social media accounts? Did you get any direct mail? Like, what was that? Or was it just really doing the search and going through the website and then calling? Was it just that straight?
Other than the collateral that they gave me when I met with them and that was it. I mean, I didn't look at any social media accounts, because I'm not going to connect with these, facilities on social media. I doubt my dad will either. I would ask them questions like, how's the Wi-Fi? Are you cool with someone doing a podcast? That kind of thing, to make sure Dad was going to be comfortable. But I don't notice any advertisements. I drive by a lot of these facilities, and before I had to search for one, probably wouldn't have known half of them were there.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh, okay, I've driven by that building for 20 years and now I know what it is. And I've been in there, and oh, that's a cool little place. Like, here's the depressing thing. And this is great for you salespeople out there. Don't ever bring this up. And if they ask, avoid the question. At one point I was looking around, I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is a cool, like, senior retirement community thing with all these different options for assisted living and whatnot. How old do you have to be to get an apartment here? And they told me, and I was depressed for a week, because on this weekend, as we're recording this, I turned 53, and the minimum age to get in is 55. And I was like, oh no, don't ever tell someone who looks like they might be 55 that the age to get in is 55. It'll upset them greatly.
It will, but at the same time, it's a great place to go and live. You got options, right?
Well, and I'll tell you, like, for what I'm paying right now for my mortage, I could move into this place and get fed 3 meals a day.
Good food too.
That alone, I'm like, holy crap, I'm in.
And good Wi-Fi, good food. What else do you need, right?
Heck yeah.
It is interesting. You mentioned about the Wi-Fi, the laundry, how consumer demand is changing rapidly of what's needed within these communities. And I appreciate you mentioning on the Wi-Fi side, like, we don't need just internet. We need strong Wi-Fi to,
true.
So my father can continue to keep up with his hobbies, which is the podcast.
And one of my other clients, I think I've told you about her before. I've got a young lady who is in an assisted living facility in Washington State, around the Seattle area, who does a weekly podcast and then a monthly Zoom call for her community of people that I help her produce. She's 92 years old, cute as can be, and does a weekly podcast. And she's got to have good Wi-Fi, good lighting. And the one frustration we've run into is, and I've told her, you got to do something more than just put a sign on the door that says, "Do not disturb, I'm recording a podcast." Because in the middle of her podcast recordings, like, the nursing staff will come in and check on her. Like they completely ignore the sign on the door and just walk right in. I'm like, no, you got to lock that door or something
You gotta
because
do
we
something about that. It's
can't have
make it a little
mirror up in the
challenging for
recorder.
you on the editing.
Yeah. So as the technology, as the ages who grew up using or became familiar with using technology in their adult lives, as they
Mhm.
age into the senior living space, these facilities are going to need to accommodate that. You're going to
Oh,
have
sure.
high speed internet. You're going to have to allow for podcasts. You're going to have to think about all those things too for your
Yeah.
community members.
And I think the need for more tech support, and it can't just be the IT guy who's on site there, but
Yep.
someone who can help set up accounts, help with any type of apps, just going through all that. I think that's wildly important because as people connect with other people, forget about a podcast
Yeah.
just to stay connected with their family and friends now. I think
Yeah.
that's a key part of the offering. So
You're going to need that support for another 10 or 15 years, and then you're not going to need it because everybody's going to know how to do it naturally because they grew up with it.
yeah, they'll have that down. On a side note, I'll tell you this, Jason. My daughters are 12 and 15, and I've learned that Christmases have changed. It used to be putting together toys at Christmas. Now it's about setting up accounts and being tech support
Yep.
to get all of the devices linked up and all the accounts set up. Jason, this has been really helpful. Let me ask you this. Going through your process, what's your advice for senior living marketing and sales teams? What would have made the process better for you? Forget about the not providing that information to a place for mom. Outside of that, what's some of the I'd say your what those takeaways that you can provide to this community of how they can better serve people who are in your position?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is, and you've harped on this for a long time on this podcast, is that emotional connection. Like the one thing that stood out for me from all of the searches that I did was having a conversation with the young lady who's like, "Well, my dad's a cruise captain. I can't wait to listen to your dad's podcast." Now all of a sudden we had something really closely in common with one another that I knew would make my dad excited. Right.
Yeah,
And so finding that thing, whether it's you're doing a little bit of snooping around someone's social media accounts before they come in to figure out what makes them jive and what they're excited about. Like if you knew tomorrow that the person coming in to a tour raised Irish setters, would you not bring that up?
yeah,
Like the more you know about your prospect as they come in, and I realize that puts an additional burden on you to do research and all that kind of stuff. And I talked to a couple of people. I made an appointment at one place and they didn't even realize I was coming. Like they
mm,
were so busy and so overburdened, the two or three people on their marketing team, that they were like, "What time was your appointment?" It's like 1:30. It was like, "Well, we don't even have you on the calendar. I don't know how we got mixed up, but let's do the tour." Right. So I felt
yeah.
like I was kind of interrupting their day.
Well, how do they handle that? Were
They
they
did
able to?
great.
Okay,
They did great. They just kinda looked at each other, "So you wanna do it or you want me to do it? I'll do it, I'll do it." And so, "Give me the
yeah,
keys." And they grabbed the keys and then they took me to and it was a
sure,
great tour and we had a wonderful conversation and I understood because I'm in the marketing space. I'm like, "Oh, some wires got crossed somewhere. They
yeah,
didn't know I was coming, but they're doing a great job of covering."
mhm,
And so I know it puts an additional burden on people to do that front end research, but the more you know about your prospect when they come in for a tour, the more of an in-depth conversation you can have with them about their parent and what interests their parent and whatnot, the better chance you have of making that emotional connection. Because even though we didn't go with that particular facility where I made the deepest emotional connection in my search, it was very important and very memorable. And if money were no object, I would absolutely have put my dad in that facility without question over anybody else, even though you're splitting hairs looking at one to the other.
sure. Yeah, and I think the other thing about that is this is something we talk about a lot, which is evolving the narrative of senior living.
Mhm.
We are close to the same age range. When I reflect upon what senior living was when I was younger, it's wildly different than what it is now.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that really helps is when we can, as a group, really elevate this space and make the process as warming and I'd say charming as possible and inviting people get to see the greatness of this in bringing people into communities. And I'm
Yeah.
not talking about the physical space, but a community where people can connect with other people. even though if it doesn't work out for your specific community, you are helping them in their search because they're really broadening their mind to what senior living can be and really providing a place to go live.
Right.
And I appreciate you adding that.
Well, I'll validate that even further. The first facility that I went and toured and did videos and pictures of and sent everything to my dad. I got on the phone with him that night and he hadn't opened up any of the pictures yet. I said, open up on your computer and let's talk through them. And he opened them up and he kind of did this. He went, oh, like he was surprised.
Yeah.
He thought in his brain, because he's 76 years old, and when he last had to deal with this, my grandmother's would have been 1998,
Yeah.
2000, around in there, when my grandmother had to be put in what was basically a nursing home. That was his perception. Was senior living was, I'm going to be chained to a bed, I'm going to have IVs in my arm all day, and everybody's going to ignore me.
Yeah.
And he sees, oh, this is a really nice apartment with a cool menu and activities. This is different. So a lot of credit is due to the senior living industry for evolving the way it has over the years. Because now my 76-year-old dad is like, okay, I could be down with this, and I didn't have to fight him on it.
That's incredible. And I think about how his life will improve overall in connecting with others. And I think about the reassurance that you will have, a peace of mind, knowing that he's in great hands. So kudos to you and supporting your dad through this. Maybe we can schedule a time at the end of the year and have a follow-up once he gets in February, and we can hear how everything went. And I need to find out what his podcast is. We need to make sure we link it in the show notes on this what is his podcast? Do you have it?
Travel and Cruise Industry News.
I love it. Okay, we're going to link that in the show notes. Jason, before we go, I want to hear more. I want you to tell our audience a little bit more about what all you do, because one of the questions is, who can I talk to if we want to start a podcast? You and I speak about it all the time. Long format content and how to chop that down to short format content and how to leverage that. But a lot of times it's really, let's start with a podcast. How do we launch this? Tell us more about what you're working on and how people can connect with you if they want to learn more about your services and how you can support their needs.
Sure. Thanks for that. So at Falls and Partners /Marketing Podcast Network, which are not the same, but very closely related. We do podcast production for people. So we'll help you build out a podcast strategy and just hand it off to you and you go do it. Or we'll actually, get on a call like this with you and make sure everything's recorded so that all you have to do is show up and interview your guest or say what you want to say on your podcast. We take those recordings, edit them down into, something that would be distributable. We, post it on all the different places for you on the Spotify's and the Apples and the YouTubes and things like that. And then we also offer services like transcription, and we'll do show notes that you can use for your descriptions on YouTube and whatnot. And we'll also take the episode and kind of cut it up into those social media shareable posts, those short videos, 10, 15, 30 seconds that help drive people to the podcast. And so been doing that for a number of different clients and a number of different verticals for 4 or 5 years now. I've actually recently expanded over into actually doing podcasts for influencers, which is an interesting shift. And because it's not a corporate client, it's someone who wants to be goofy and whatnot on the internet. So that's a lot of fun. And then I have a music podcast of my own that I run as well. So I have a lot of fun doing all the editing and production and distribution and helping people figure out how to get that long form content out there and drive people to it.
Yeah. And again, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I go back to just asking Jason just very simple questions, and I'm almost afraid to ask him these questions, but he provided the blueprint of how to go about this. And to this day, I ask him a lot of questions throughout the week. Wonder if this happens. I'm getting this error. He is just a wealth of information. I highly recommend anybody who's in content or anybody who wants to launch a podcast, reach out to Jason. They're a great service. So Jason, thank you again for joining us, and we'll have all of the links in the show notes. And hey, we wish your dad nothing but success through this moving process.
Thanks a lot, Larry. It's great to be here on the other side of the camera for once. This is cool.
That's right. All right. Hey, thank you, Jason. A big thanks to Jason for reminding us that senior living marketing isn't just about strategies, platforms, or tactics. It's about people navigating one of the most emotional decisions of their lives. Hearing Jason's experience reinforces a few important truths that we can all take back to our teams. First, Pricing transparency matters more than we sometimes realize. When families can quickly understand whether a community is a fit, it builds trust and saves time on both sides of the process. Second, personal connection still wins. Amenities may look similar, websites might sound the same, but a genuine human moment showing curiosity, empathy, and understanding can be the difference that sticks. And third, small moments create the biggest impact. Clear follow-up, thoughtful communication, and reducing friction throughout the journey don't require a massive budget, but they do require intention. As we start this year, this episode serves as a great reminder that the work we do truly matters. When we focus on the small steps and human moments, we don't just improve marketing, we improve the experience for the families who need it the most. A big thank you to Jason for joining us, sharing with us, and all of his work to make this podcast happen. And until next time, let's go create some meaningful connections.